Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you are all well, you amazing, amazing people. You're looking amazing. It's because it's coming up to Christmas, and you get that Christmas glow. No matter what, it does affect you, it does hit you, and it's had a positive influence on you. And we're going to get into some meat and potatoes. Now, later on today, I'm going to be touching on the Nickola bully case. So, if you were someone who watched that case and watched how it unfolded, and you're interested, check it out. But right now, we're just going to talk about one specific thing, and that is Bryan Kohberger himself. Now, not about the Idaho 4 in general, but just I want people for a second, well, more than a second, to think about Bryan Kohberger. And I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to say, when you look at Bryan Kohberger, what do you see? What do you see? We've seen him in the court settings. We've seen him in little recordings of when he's interacted with police officers, and we've seen him interact with Ann Taylor. We've watched him. We haven't seen much of him, but we've seen him. And I want you to let me know down below, when you look at Bryan Kohberger, what do you see? What vibe do you get from Bryan Kohberger? And I'll tell you why I ask. Because we know that there's not really any specific look for evil. There isn't. Evil can look like anything. We've seen in the past how some of the most notorious serial killers known, they didn't necessarily look like it. And people were caught shocked. They were shocked when they found out that these people had done the crimes that they'd done. We've seen not necessarily serial killers, but we have seen family units obliterated, such as the Chris Watts case and what he did to his family. And you look at that guy. Some people will turn around and say they got a bit of a funny vibe off him, but they get a funny vibe off him when you're hearing about what he's done. And there might be a program that comes out, a documentary that documents it, and that will show footage of him. We saw it on Netflix not that long ago. And yes, you're right, you get a funny vibe off him. But that vibe that you get off him is because you've got prior knowledge. But some people have brilliant intuition. I worked in the roles that I've worked, and to a degree I had to try and establish how genuine people were, whether they were walking the plot and not looking to buy, so to speak. And you have to kind of ascertain very quickly whether it's worth wasting time with someone or not. And in the managerial role, you have to learn to speak to your staff and get to know your staff and know when they're perhaps not firing on all cylinders and there are things in the background that you need to help them with. Or if they're taking the piss, because people do. But what I'm saying is we do have intuitive minds, and we can look at something and we can get vibes off people. And with regards to Bryan Kohberger, it's a struggle. Now, people will turn around and I hear them say, but Ted Bundy walked into this sorority house, or this college setting, and he did what he did. But the problem when you look at some of these other crimes, there is a brutality to it that is missing from the Idaho 4 case. And what I mean is, yes, we hear that the crimes are brutal. The actual crimes themselves were absolutely brutal, but it was a polished crime. It was a polished crime. And what I mean by that, I mean that when Ted Bundy walked into where he walked into and did what he did, it was messy, it was sloppy, it would eventually lead to his demise. And even though in the Idaho 4 case, some would argue that he got caught, Bryan Kohberger did it and he got caught. We don't know if he did it. We can look at some of the circumstantial evidence and decide in our minds that he's the guy who did it. But it's like this knife sheath. This knife sheath is the only thing that ties him to this crime. Unless somebody pointed the finger and said, that's the guy that you need to look at. No DNA in his car. No DNA in his apartment. No DNA at his parents. We've seen nothing. Yes, we've seen a car that seems to be his in the area. But that doesn't necessarily prove anything. And without the knife sheath in the first place, would they have ever found the car? Would there have been a big enough connection to connect the dots? Perhaps, who knows? But the footage that we've seen, it's questionable. It's questionable. And like I say, the evidence is circumstantial at best. But the crime was polished. So what I'm saying is, when you look at Bryan Kohberger, do you see a guy who is a psychopath? Psychotic? Do you see a guy who is a potential very skilled and established killer? Do you see someone who's a chancer? Do you see someone who's been bullied and snapped? A love-struck puppy who fell in love with someone online and they rebuffed his approaches and he exploded into a rage. This guy, despite what we've been led to believe, so he turns his phone off. That was a mistake. If it was Bryan, that was a mistake to turn your phone off. He could have done something else there. Obviously, we don't want to turn this into a serial killer's handbook, but that was a mistake. Drove his own car. That was a mistake. Although some may say, Ted Bundy drove his own car and look how many people he got away with. But he drove his own car, he got caught on camera, he left an eyewitness, and he left a knife sheath at the scene. And this catalogue of errors, to me, they do seem a little bit, how can I say, there's so many mistakes that you have to question the mistakes, if that makes sense. I question everything because there just seems to be so many mistakes. But anyway, I digress. Point being, he goes into this house, he enters this house, and he eradicates 4 people from the planet. And he does it efficiently, and he gets away. Seemingly he doesn't get injured. He uses the weapon in a extremely skilled fashion. Extremely skilled. And not only that, but he manages to confuse a coroner, because they would lead you to believe that the weapon that she describes and the injuries that she describes are not in line with a K-bar, unless that K-bar is used in such a manner that we have discussed previously that it would show military skill, military prowess. It wasn't just used in a, how can I say, like an unskilled fishmonger fashion. This is someone who knew their way around this particular weapon. So when you look at Bryan, do you see these things? Do you see someone who could do this? Because ultimately he could, but are you someone who gets vibes off people? Are you someone who can look at someone and think, do you know what? There's something about him. And this is what I think. So when you look at Bryan, what do you see? Do you see the patsy? The school book kid, the bookworm, who's just been set up, or just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the fact that he did these things, he drove around at night, his phone went dead at an inconvenient time, and perhaps he touched a knife sheath or touched something that touched something and it got on this knife sheath, or perhaps the process itself was just flawed. They were searching for something in the end, or, you know, searching for something, someone, and they could make that fit just because the way the system works with the little what they had. And that's what's important. Was the DNA always about manipulating that sample to get to a specific result? And they were just able to do that? Or was it genuinely him? And was this his first time? Was it not? Answers on a postcard or down below. I'll catch you all in the next one.